You look at India today, right?
Yeah.
You see a titan.
Oh, absolutely. A massive economic giant.
Yeah, exactly. A nation armed with nuclear weapons. A global juggernaut.
Yeah.
That is, like, absolutely dominating the IT industry.
Right. Sending rovers to the moon.
Building infrastructure
Yeah.
at a pace that just defies belief.
Totally.
And then you look at the dinner plate.
Yeah.
You see a single potato.
A single ordinary potato.
And we are going to deeply unpack this today.
Yeah.
Because, well, here is the ultimate paradox of modern economics.
Right.
That one potato.
Yeah.
That single, humble vegetable.
Yeah.
It holds that entire nuclear-armed titan completely hostage.
It really does. It is the great contradiction of our time.
I mean, it sounds crazy.
It sounds totally crazy.
Yeah.
When we think of national economies, especially the massive ones, we expect them to be driven by high-tech exports.
Right.
We think about complex derivatives, massive manufacturing bases, silicon chips, global trade agreements.
The big stuff.
Exactly, the big stuff. But the reality on the ground is shockingly simple and honestly incredibly fragile.
It really is.
Yeah.
So let's rewind to February 2011.
Okay.
The former Prime Minister of India, Manmohan Singh, stood up in New Delhi. He delivered a warning to the nation. And it was just chilling.
Do you have the quote?
Yeah, I have it right here. He said, quote, "Inflation poses a serious threat to the growth momentum. It needs to be tackled with great urgency," end quote.
Wow.
Now, stop and think about that.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't talking about a housing bubble bursting.
Right.
He wasn't talking about tech stocks crashing.
No.
He wasn't talking about toxic mortgages like we saw in the West back in 2008.
Not at all. He was talking about lentils.
Exactly.
He's talking about milk, about fruits and vegetables.
It blows my mind.
The brutal vulnerability of the Indian economy is tied to everyday survival. These everyday grocery items are invisible chains.
Yeah.
They're literally choking the nation's economic lifeblood.
Look, I try to picture it like this. Imagine you are building a state-of-the-art billion-dollar spacecraft.
Okay, I'm with you.
You have the best engineers on Earth. The launch sequence is perfect. The thrusters are primed.
Everything is ready to go.
But then the entire navigation system gets completely short-circuited.
Oh, no.
Why? Because someone spilled a single drop of hot chai on the dashboard.
Yes, that is exactly it.
That spilled chai is India's food inflation.
Right.
It is a tiny, seemingly localized problem that has the absolute power to bring an entire macroeconomic machine to a grinding halt.
Which brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. Because you are about to step into an academic crossover event of epic proportions.
Oh, I love this part. Tell them who we have.
We have a heavy-hitting research team. Laurence Ball from Johns Hopkins University.
Huge.
Anusha Chari from the University of North Carolina.
Right.
And Prachi Mishra from the Reserve Bank of India.
That is an absolute dream team. I mean, you have top-tier American academia combined with the inside knowledge of the Indian Central Bank.
And they came together to ask one massive overarching question.
What was it?
When the absolute golden rules of Western economic textbooks meet the mysterious, chaotic reality of this South Asian giant, why do those rules fail?
Why do they just shatter into a million pieces?
Exactly. Why do the smartest models on Earth experience the most brutal collective failure imaginable when applied to India?
And what I love about this team is they didn't just glance at the surface numbers.
No, they didn't.
They didn't just pull up a quick internet chart of India's GDP. That is the lazy way out.
Totally.
They dug deep. They pulled 20 years of high-frequency, micro-level industry price data. We're talking about data spanning from 1994 all the way to 2014.
This point just cannot be overstated. This is not an ivory tower exercise.
Right.
They didn't just look at broad national averages. They looked at actual price tags.
Wow.
Millions of them across dozens and dozens of specific industries over 2 decades.
That is an insane amount of work.
They needed to look under the hood. They needed to figure out why the textbook theories, the theories that steer the U.S. Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank, were burning to the ground in New Delhi.
And what they found underneath all that data is a total nightmare.
It really is.
It is a story of pure survival anxiety.
Yeah.
You have to visualize the reality of what happened here.
Yeah.
It was a price explosion, an explosion that threw hundreds of millions of ordinary people into a daily, brutal battle just to survive.
The raw numbers from this period are just staggering. Between 2001 and 2010, the consumer price inflation rate didn't just rise slowly.
Wow.
It didn't just creep up. It went on a rampage.
A total rampage. It skyrocketed from 3.7% to a staggering 12.1%.
Which is astronomical.
Right. Put yourself in the shoes of an average worker. Imagine your grocery bill tripling in its growth rate.
It's terrifying.
Your rent, your cooking fuel, the basic cost of keeping your family alive is suddenly just running away from you?
And the terror doesn't just stop when the number ticks down.
What do you mean?
Well, even when inflation finally dropped back down to 5.2% around 2015, the damage to the national psyche was already done.
Ah, I see.
The deep societal anxiety never stopped burning. If you look at this chart in the study, it is a terrifying steep red line climbing relentlessly upward.
Exactly. It is not just a statistic on a financial terminal. It is a measurement of national panic.
Totally.
But, if you ask the average person on the street why this happens, what do they usually say?
They say, oh, the government is spending too much. The central bank is printing too much paper money.
Right. That is a common sense answer.
Yeah.
But the truth uncovered by this research team is vastly darker and, honestly, vastly more complex.
It is.
So let's talk about how economists usually measure this stuff, because this brings us to the blindfold.
The famous blindfold.
In the West, economists have this golden metric. They treat it like the Holy Grail. They call it core inflation.
Right.
When they calculate core inflation in the U.S. or Europe, they do something that sounds utterly wild to a normal person.
It really does.
They just delete food and energy prices from the data?
They literally erase it. They take the total inflation number and they literally subtract the cost of eating and driving.
Which is insane.
Well, they justified this by claiming those specific prices are too volatile.
Okay, sure.
They argue that, a sudden freeze in Florida might ruin the orange crop, making oranges expensive for a month. But that doesn't mean the underlying economy is inflating.
I mean, I guess.
So they call food and energy statistical noise. They strip it out to see the real underlying trend.
Okay, I get the logic. I do. But stop and think about that for a second, especially in the context of a developing nation.
Yeah, this is where it falls apart.
If you strip food out of the inflation data, you are completely ignoring the actual physical suffering of the people.
Absolutely.
If the metric you use to steer the country intentionally deletes the cost of food, who exactly are the policymakers closing their eyes to?
That is the million-dollar question. In a developed nation, maybe you can get away with this statistical trick.
Right, because we are richer.
Exactly. In the U.S., food is a relatively small slice of the average household budget. If food goes up, you might buy cheaper brands, but it doesn't bankrupt you.
But in India?
In India, food is the absolute largest chunk of what normal people spend their hard-earned money on.
Wow.
For hundreds of millions of people, food is the economy.
So if you delete food from the Indian data, your data is officially living in a fantasy world. You are measuring a ghost.
You really are.
It's an absurd way to govern. That is literally like trying to measure how wet a massive hurricane is, but deciding to mathematically subtract the rain.
That is a perfect analogy.
You just declare, oh, the rain is too unpredictable. Sometimes it rains hard, sometimes it drizzles. Let's just measure the wind to figure out how wet things are.
Right.
It is absolute insanity.
And this is exactly why the research team knew they couldn't use the Western core inflation model.
They had to throw it out.
They did. They needed a new tool. They needed a scalpel. Specifically, they brought in something called the Cleveland filter.
The Cleveland filter. Let's break this down. Because they realized they couldn't just blindly delete the food, but they also couldn't just look at the chaotic overall number.
Right. The Cleveland filter was originally developed by researchers at the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland.
Okay.
It is a highly precise, surgical academic tool. Instead of blindly deleting entire categories like all food and all energy, they use a weighted median method.
So how does that actually work in practice? Walk us through the mechanics.
Well, every single quarter, the researchers take the entire economy, all the data.
All of it.
They look at 81 distinct specific industries, everything from textiles to onions to steel.
Wow, okay.
They rank the price changes of every single one of those 81 industries, from the ones that dropped in price the most, all the way up to the ones that spiked the highest.
Well, it's a massive list.
A massive list. Then they take a statistical scalpel. They chop off the extreme highest price changes at the very top of the list, and they chop off the extreme lowest price changes at the very bottom.
They just cut them off.
They ignore the chaotic edges entirely. They find the exact middle, the median.
Imagine a massive chaotic curve of price changes.
Yeah.
You have wild, screaming spikes on both ends.
Yeah.
Maybe a flood wiped out a specific vegetable, so it's up 60%.
Yeah.
Maybe a new subsidy made something else drop 30%.
Right.
You take red scissors, You snip off those screaming, chaotic edges, you throw them to the tracks.
Exactly. And what is left? When you cut away the noise, what remains is the smooth, undeniable truth of the underlying economy.
The real deal.
It is the true heartbeat, the true core trend of where prices are naturally heading.
But here's the crazy part. When Ball, Chari, and Mishra applied this specific scalpel to the Indian economy, the face underneath the mask was completely alien.
It was a shock.
In the United States, if you look at overall headline inflation, and then you look at this filtered median core inflation, they basically hold hands.
Yeah.
They track together over time. They tell the same story.
But in India, there is a massive, unbridgeable abyss torn right between them. They do not hold hands. They live in different universes.
The actual numbers from the study are just shocking. Let me read this.
Go for it.
From 1994 to 2014, the official overall wholesale headline inflation, the number printed in the newspapers, averaged 5.56%.
Right? 5.56.
But the real underlying median core inflation, the steady heartbeat they found after using the scalpel,
Yeah.
it was only 3.43%.
Wow. That is a 2.13% gap.
A massive gap.
Now, a 2% difference might not sound like a huge deal at a normal dinner party,
Sure.
but in macroeconomics, over a 20-year period, it is a permanent hallucination in the national data.
It's a phantom tax.
It literally is.
The official numbers are constantly spiking upwards. They're sprinting away, leaving the true core trend eating their dust.
Yeah.
The underlying economy is actually running relatively cool at 3.43%, but the official thermometer is screaming that it's boiling at 5.56%.
So as researchers, the next logical question is obvious.
What's dragging it up?
Exactly. What is dragging the official numbers so high? What is living in those extreme edges that the scalpel cut off? Who are the culprits?
We have to unmask them. And when the researchers did, it revealed something they call a mutant distribution.
Or, as it's known in the data, the rightward run.
The rightward run.
Let's talk about what a normal price distribution looks like.
Right.
In a normal, healthy, balanced world, price distributions across an economy look like a bell curve.
Right.
Some prices go up a little bit, some prices go down a little bit. Most things stay roughly in the middle. The bell is symmetrical.
Nice and even.
But in India, the price distribution almost exclusively mutates to the right.
Toward the side of the graph, representing explosive, violent price hikes.
Exactly. It almost never mutates to the left. You very rarely see massive cascading price crashes across industries.
The lever only pulls one way. So who is pulling this one-way lever?
To understand the scale of this, look at the second quarter of 2008 in their data.
Okay, 2008.
The skewness, which is the mathematical measure of how warped the curve is toward one side, was a massive 3.08.
Is that a lot?
To put that in perspective, a perfectly symmetrical bell curve has a skewness of exactly 0.
Oh, wow.
So 3.08 means the distribution is violently stretched to the right. What that physically looks like is this. In that quarter, most of the 81 industries in the Indian economy sat completely still, flat, normal.
Just chilling.
But a tiny handful of items, they suddenly went completely supernova. They hit 35% inflation. Some hit 50% inflation.
In one quarter.
In a single 3-month quarter.
Wait, pause. So you are saying that the entire country's macroeconomic panic, the terrifying headlines, the pressure on the central bank is usually being driven by just a tiny, isolated club of renegade products?
Yes. A radical extremist fringe of the economy is hijacking the overall narrative.
That is insane. So we need to name these products. Who lives in this top 10% extreme right tail of price hikes? What is actually causing this rightward run?
These are the masterminds of the storm. The researchers broke down their monopoly, and it is incredibly revealing.
Give it to me.
Primary food items cause 27.83% of these extreme right tail shocks.
Okay, food.
Fuel and power cause 23.50% of the shocks.
Fuel.
And manufactured food causes another 12.22%.
Wait, if you add those up, that is an overwhelming 63.5% absolute monopoly on price explosions.
It was huge.
Just 3 categories: primary food, processed food, and fuel, owning almost 2/3 of the nation's economic terror.
And this is exactly where the illusion traps policymakers.
How so?
Well, when you see a sudden spike in food or energy, it looks harmless to a macroeconomist. It looks like a short-term, temporary supply hiccup.
Oh, I see.
You think, oh, the monsoon rains were late this year, so the onion harvest is bad, or, there is a temporary geopolitical issue in the Middle East, so oil is up this month.
Yeah, makes sense.
The standard economic textbook says, ignore it, it will pass. Next year, the rain will be fine, and prices will drop back down.
But they don't, do they?
No. The true horror in the Indian economy is how these specific, supposedly temporary hiccups silently mutate. They turn into a permanent, irreversible economic disease.
Because we aren't talking about luxury watches getting more expensive.
Yo.
It's not just random stuff getting pricey.
Exactly. We are talking about survival goods.
Yeah.
You cannot boycott eating. You cannot simply decide to skip purchasing cooking fuel this month because the price is high. Demand for these items is incredibly rigid.
You literally have to buy them.
Because people must buy them, these items create a terrifying gravitational pull. When they spike, they threaten to drag the entire structural economy into a black hole.
Which brings us to a fascinating mystery. They call it the ghost of the Phillips curve.
Ooh, yes. This is a big one.
For years, before this specific paper was published, countless brilliant scholars used the most complex mathematical models on Earth to study India.
Right.
And they swore blindly that the most foundational law of macroeconomics simply did not exist in this country.
They are talking about the Phillips curve. It is the absolute bedrock of macroeconomic theory. Every central banker on Earth uses it.
So what is it, for those who don't know?
The Phillips curve states that there is a classic, unavoidable trade-off, a mathematical relationship between inflation and how hot the actual physical economy is running.
Okay.
Think of the economy like a car engine. If you press the gas pedal to the floor, the engine generates more speed. More speed means factories are churning out goods, people are getting hired, unemployment drops.
Sounds great.
But when an engine runs at maximum speed, it generates intense heat. In economics, that heat is inflation.
Right.
If the heat gets too high, you have to ease off the gas, the economy slows down, people lose jobs, but the inflation cools off. That trade-off is the Phillips curve.
And we call the measurement of that speed, that temperature, the output gap. It measures how far the economy is operating above or below its true maximum potential. But when previous scholars looked at India, they used the official headline data. They ran the math comparing inflation to the output gap, and they found nothing.
Zero correlation.
The Phillips curve looked completely dead in India. The engine was hot, but the speed was low. The engine was cool, but the speed was high. It made absolutely no sense.
But here's the brilliant revelation from Ball, Chari, and Mishra.
What did they find?
The Phillips curve wasn't dead.
Oh.
It was just buried alive.
Oh, wow.
It was buried under the extreme statistical noise of the potato and the fuel pump.
That makes so much sense.
Once our researchers applied that Cleveland scalpel, once they snipped off the screaming 63.5% monopoly of food and fuel shocks, a statistical miracle happened.
The classic Phillips curve perfectly resurrected from the grave.
It emerged pristine, clear as day. The fundamental rules of economic gravity do apply to India. The textbooks were entirely wrong. You just needed the right mathematical lens to see the gravity working.
Okay, so they proved the foundation is alive. The engine heat corresponds to the engine speed.
Right.
But to prove that, they had to accurately measure the speed. They had to measure the real economy's temperature. They had to calculate this output gap.
And measuring the output gap in a developing nation is incredibly difficult.
Why is it so hard?
You are trying to ask, what is the absolute maximum amount of stuff this country could theoretically produce right now, and how much are they actually producing?
It sounds like a guessing game.
To figure this out, the team had to do some serious statistical engineering. First, they had to splice together gross domestic product data from different base years, because the Indian government actually changes how it measures GDP over time.
That sounds like a headache.
Then they had to run all of this raw data through a highly specialized algorithm, a program developed by the U.S. Census Bureau called X13.
Wait, why X13? What does that actually do to the data?
X13 is designed to strip out predictable, wild, seasonal swings.
Give me an example.
Think about agriculture. India has a massive agricultural sector. During harvest season, economic activity spikes violently.
Sure.
Millions of tons of grain are moved, sold, and processed. Then, in the off-season, it drops dead.
Makes sense.
If you don't mathematically smooth out that seasonality, your data will tell you the economy goes into a massive recession every single winter and booms every single autumn. It totally obscures the underlying year-over-year growth trend. X13 flattens that harvest noise out.
Okay, so they slice the data, they smooth out the harvest, they measure the output gap, and the result they got makes absolutely no sense at first glance.
Not at all.
We are talking about a period from 1994 to 2014, an era of terrifying global financial tsunamis, massive geopolitical earthquakes, the dot-com bust, the 2008 global financial crisis.
Huge events.
Yet, when they measured the official heartbeat of India's physical economy, when they measured it, it looked impossibly artificially calm.
Let's look at the aftermath of the brutal 2008 global crash. The global banking system was collapsing, trade was seizing up, the world was practically on fire.
Everyone was panicking.
But according to the official data, India's measured output gap, it only hit a maximum of positive 1.5% to negative 2.2%.
That is a dull thermometer.
Yep.
That is an instrument flat out refusing to register a fever.
Compare it to the United States. During booms or busts, the U.S. output gap swings wildly. It regularly hits positive or negative 5% or more.
Which is huge.
A 5% drop means factories are shuttered, millions are laid off, the engine is stalling out. But India's gap, it never crossed 2.5% in either direction in this entire data set.
Which means India's official GDP numbers have almost certainly been artificially smoothed out by the authorities over the years. They are too perfect. They are too placid.
Yeah.
Imagine I am a doctor. You come into the emergency room. You are sweating, delirious, clearly incredibly sick.
Right.
I put a thermometer in your mouth, but my thermometer mechanically tops out at 99 degrees. It physically cannot read higher.
Oh, that's bad.
It beeps. I look at it, see 99 degrees, and tell a patient with a lethal 105-degree fever to just take an aspirin and go home. You're fine. The data says you're fine.
That is exactly what the central bank is dealing with. A broken, dulled thermometer deciding the economic fate of over 1 billion people.
It's terrifying.
And when the thermometer is broken, the central bank is flying blind. They cannot accurately diagnose how hot or cold the economy really is. And because they are flying blind, the actions they take will force the country to pay catastrophic hidden prices.
Which brings us to the most human and, frankly, the most tragic part of this research. Because behind all this cold, ruthless mathematical formula, behind the X13 algorithms and the Cleveland filters, hides a psychological virus.
A literal virus.
We are talking about the psychology of panic.
Economics isn't just about math. It is about human behavior. It is about the most tragic, helpless psychological defense mechanism of ordinary people trying to survive.
Like, how do people guess tomorrow's prices? How does a mother figure out how much to save for rice next month? How does a factory worker know how much of a raise to demand?
Right. To understand this, the researchers use something called the partial adjustment model.
Okay, what is that?
This model mathematically proves that your current expectations of the future are heavily, deeply infected by your trauma of the past.
Trauma.
Yes. When you try to guess what inflation will be tomorrow, you don't read a central bank report. You combine your fear from last quarter with the historical reality of the prices you've been paying.
It creates a phenomenon of exponential decay.
Exactly. The trauma of past inflation doesn't just vanish overnight. If prices double and then the government goes on television and says, we fixed it, inflation is 0 now, the public doesn't instantly believe them.
Of course not.
That fear fades away incredibly slowly. It acts like radioactive fallout in the collective minds of the public.
This is the stubborn social memory. This is a psychological glue so sticky, so deeply powerful, that it completely defies logical central bank policy.
It really does.
Once the absolute terror of rising prices takes root in a consumer's mind, you could theoretically slash prices in half tomorrow, and they still wouldn't trust the stability. They will still act out of fear.
And the researchers didn't just theorize this. They found the smoking gun in the data. They calculated a terrifying adjustment parameter. They call it gamma.
Gamma.
In India, based on their data, gamma is 0.902.
Stop right there. What does that 0.902 actually mean in the real world?
It means that 90.2% of the inflation panic from the previous quarter directly infects the current quarter.
Wait, 90%?
90.2%. It carries over almost entirely. It means that if inflation spikes today, only 9.8% of that psychological shock dissipates after 3 months.
So it takes over a full year, 4 whole quarters, for a single isolated price shock to finally mentally wash out of the societal system.
Exactly.
Panic is quite literally sticky. It clings to the collective consciousness.
If a terrible monsoon destroys the onion crop in June, onions get expensive. That is a physical reality.
Yeah.
But the psychological terror of that June event, because gamma is 0.902, that terror is still dictating how aggressively unions demand higher wages the following March.
Wow.
The onions might be cheap again, but the mind virus is still active.
And curing that mind virus, curing that deep, sticky panic, it is not easy. It is not free. In fact, it demands a brutal toll. It demands the butcher's bill.
The butcher's bill.
We have a cold, merciless number in this research. It is a number that reveals exactly how many innocent people must be thrown to the wolves to fix this problem.
It reveals how many small businesses must be allowed to go bankrupt, how many construction projects must be halted, how many factory workers must be laid off and thrown into the streets.
Just to fix a number.
All just to make that inflation number drop.
Yeah.
Economists call this the sacrifice ratio.
The sacrifice ratio. The paper calculates India's sacrifice ratio precisely. It is 2.7.
Let's explain what that means.
Please do.
To permanently lower core inflation by just 1%, the country must deliberately destroy 2.7% of its total annualized gross domestic product.
Destroy it. It is the collateral damage of monetary policy. You want to kill inflation. You have to raise interest rates.
Right.
When you raise interest rates, borrowing becomes expensive. The local business can't afford a loan to build a new warehouse, so they cancel the project.
Yep.
They don't hire the 50 builders. Those 50 builders don't get paychecks. They stop buying clothes. The clothing store fires a clerk.
It ripples through everything.
You deliberately crush demand. You wipe out billions of dollars of wealth. You crush livelihoods, all to force prices to stop rising by just 1%.
Let's apply this true price of cooling down to reality. Let's
Yes.
look at the actual goal the central bank had. The Reserve Bank of India had a mandate. They wanted to drop inflation from 5.2% down to a legal target of 4.0%.
Okay, that is a 1.2% drop. On paper, that sounds incredibly small. It sounds easy.
But do the math. 1.2 multiplied by the sacrifice ratio of 2.7.
Okay.
That equals a colossal 3.24% of annual GDP.
Oh, my God.
That is the amount of economic output that must be entirely, intentionally annihilated to achieve that pretty number on a central bank spreadsheet.
3.24% of an entire nation's output.
Hold on.
Erased from existence.
Just gone.
That is like finding a single ugly spider in the bathroom of your beautiful guest house. And instead of using a shoe, you burn the entire guest house to the ground.
Right.
The spider is dead, sure. The inflation is down. But look at the ashes. Look at the rubble. Was the spider worth the guest house?
That is the tragic, impossible deal with the devil that central bankers have to make every single day. They have to spend trillions of rupees in lost output, massacring millions of potential jobs, just to anchor that psychological panic we talked about earlier, just to reset gamma.
And here is where the tragedy gets even worse. What if they use the wrong data to make that decision?
Oh, then it's a disaster.
What if they fall into the trap of statistics? Confronted with a chaotic smokescreen of short-term noise, the daily headlines about tomatoes and gas prices, the most powerful policymakers on earth often stubbornly cling to a broken compass.
Remember earlier when we talked about the Cleveland filter, snipping off the extremes?
Yeah, the scalpel.
What happens if you try to run this complex macroeconomic model using the official headline inflation instead? What if you leave the potato and the fuel in the mix?
Researchers tried it, and the math literally explodes.
That sticky panic parameter we mentioned? Gamma, the one that was 0.902.
Yeah.
When you run the math with headline inflation, gamma goes slightly over 1.0.
Wait, over 1.
Yes. And if gamma is over 1, the entire model breaks.
It just shatters.
It mathematically unravels. A gamma over 1 means panic doesn't decay. It accelerates infinitely. Every new shock adds to the old shock, compounding forever.
That is terrifying.
The output gap loses all statistical significance. The equations just stop working.
So using the official unadjusted headline data to set interest rates means you are flying a commercial airliner with instruments that are actively screaming lies at you.
Exactly.
The altimeter is broken, the horizon line is spinning, you pull up, you stall and crash. You dive, you crash.
Because you are tracking the violent noise of a storm, not the true deep economic current of the ocean.
And beneath that noise are dark currents. The unanchored demon.
This is what keeps central bankers awake at 3:10 a.m. This is the ultimate nightmare scenario.
What is it?
It's called the terminal inflation spiral, and it is quietly completing itself every single day, not in a bank vault, but on the dinner plates and at the gas pumps of the poorest citizens.
Economists call it the second-round effect. Let's trace how this infection spreads.
Okay.
A potato gets expensive because of a bad harvest. That is a physical first-round effect. It's a supply shock.
But because India's inflation expectations are unanchored, meaning the general public has no deep, ingrained trust in a stable baseline of prices, that physical spike immediately triggers psychological terror.
Right.
That panic causes the second-round effect. The workers go to their bosses. They say, look, the price of potatoes has doubled. I can't feed my family. I need a 10% raise today or I quit.
And the boss?
The boss looks at the labor market and realizes they have to pay the higher wages. But now the boss has higher costs. So what do?
They raise prices.
They raise the prices of whatever they produce. They raise the price of their shoes, their software, their haircuts, their accounting services.
The short-term food shock has now permanently infected the core inflation.
Yep.
It started in the grocery aisle, but now it's in the price of haircut. It's in the price of a tractor. The disease has spread from the skin to the bones. It is structural now.
And what triggers that initial shock? What lights the match that burns down the house?
The leverage of the heavens.
The weather.
This is the part that is so hard to comprehend. How is it possible that an absolute juggernaut of a nation, a country possessing global nuclear deterrence, a country sending complex missions to the South Pole of the moon?
Yeah.
How does it have its entire financial destiny dangling by a single thread, held at the absolute mercy of the weather?
The data proves it undeniably. When the researchers took their model and introduced the relative price of food and energy into the regression equation for headline inflation,
What happened?
the resulting coefficient was a massive, highly significant 0.429.
Almost half.
Almost half of the entire fluctuation in the nation's overall headline inflation is chained directly to whether or not it rains and whether global fuel prices jump.
It is a terrifying, breathtaking fragility. You can have the best central bankers in the world, you can have brilliant monetary policy, you can have perfect interest rates.
And it all gets completely wiped out because the monsoon rains were 3 weeks late.
Which forces us to look in the mirror of history, because we have seen this movie before.
We really have.
Right.
The question is, can India escape the exact same brutal, agonizing economic deep freeze that the United States was forced to endure to cure this exact same disease?
It is a chilling parallel. When you look at India's recent inflation mechanics, the unanchored expectations, the supply shocks infecting the core, it looks exactly, flawlessly like the United States during the 1970s and early 1980s.
It's a perfect mirror image. The U.S. had the horrific stagflation era. The American public had unanchored expectations, a psychology of constant panic. They assumed prices would rise forever.
Right.
And then supply-side explosions like the 1970s Arab oil embargo acted as the match. The price of oil spiked, and it lit the powder keg of total structural inflation across the entire U.S. economy.
And how did the U.S. fix it? It took a sledgehammer. It took the Volcker shock.
Paul Volcker.
The Federal Reserve Chairman at the time, Paul Volcker, decided the only way to kill the mind virus was brute force. He raised interest rates so brutally high, nearly 20%, that it intentionally triggered a massive, crushing recession.
It was the ultimate butcher's bill. Millions of Americans lost their jobs, businesses went under, farming communities were devastated.
Really awful.
But it worked. It was the only way to violently reset the psychology of the American public, to prove to them that the central bank would not let prices rise no matter the cost in human suffering. It scrubbed the mind virus clean.
So the million-dollar question for today. Will India's new 4% monetary policy framework save them from this fate?
That is the experiment happening right now. Can the Reserve Bank of India anchor the public's art? Can they convince 1 billion people to trust the 4% target without having to crash the Titan, without having to inflict a Volcker shock?
We are staring down the barrel of a historical tragedy. We are watching the gears of time turn, wondering if the public's deep-seated fear of starvation and poverty can ever truly be calmed by a spreadsheet target.
To summarize the thesis of this incredible research, India's inflation isn't just a simple story of a government printing too much money. It is a localized supply-side shock. Food, fuel, the potato, the gas pump, they act as a spark.
Just a tiny spark.
But because public psychology is highly flammable, because the trauma is sticky and expectations are completely unanchored, that tiny spark sets the entire structural economy on fire.
You strip away the noise with the Cleveland scalpel, and you see the underlying truth. You see the classic Phillips curve burning underneath. You see this sacrifice ratio demanding its payment in lost GDP.
You see the real cost.
And that leaves us with a final chilling thought for you to carry with you. We know India's economic fate is intimately tied to the fragility of food and fuel shocks. But look around you. Look at the globe today.
It's changing fast.
We are entering an unprecedented era of geopolitical fragmentation. Supply chains for energy and resources are tearing apart. Nations are hoarding.
Right.
We're watching catastrophic climate disasters routinely destroy crop yields worldwide. Droughts in Europe. Floods in Asia.
That's everything.
If the weather's becoming more chaotic, if the energy markets are becoming more fractured, if the matches are going to strike more often, and if global anxiety is rising, are we about to see this unanchored inflation spiral become not just India's history, but the entire world's unavoidable future?
That is the real question.
When you see the weather report change tomorrow, ask yourself, who really holds the ultimate power over our modern world? The complex algorithms, the nuclear missiles, or the potato sitting on your plate?